Ken Mijungu is still with me, but Ken, this was an extension by 2 days, but the activist still wants this extended even further. What does that then mean?
This is just a temporary relief that was given. You know, the case was filed under certificate of urgency. So the court granted the 2 days extension, Trevor, and today they're back in court. Yesterday, I spoke to the IEBC chair, Wafula Chepukati, and he told me that today when they go to court, they will be presenting some of those facts to the court to tell the court the reasons why they can't have this extension further, and it needs to end today. One of the reasons they are going to advance is the strict timelines, which we'll be delving into with my panel later. But the strict timelines in that by 10th of May, they expect the political parties to start inspecting the register, or must have inspected the register. Look at it this way, Trevor. The register has to be looked at least twice, which means the first time after this mass voter registration 2 ends, and then secondly the interim register, and then the final one will be taken to the printer, and that also will be subject to inspection by the political party. So that's one of the reasons they are going with you court. But Trevor, it baffles me what Grace says. The delay of ID cards is one of the reasons why the activist Nakia White is in court today also.
But there's also this compounded by the fact that if there's any more extension, then it means there needs to be more budgetary allocations to that, and the funds issue has always been one of the most thorny issues around the IEBC registration.
You know, one of the things the government has done with this election is to provide funds as at and when needed. In fact, their budget is one of the highest in recent history. So the government has given the money, or you know, the money cannot be sufficient, but at least they've been given all the money they wanted. And I'll tell you this for a fact, every single day those people on contract who are registering voters are on the ground. IEBC is spending 30 million shillings, Trevor.
Wow, that's quite a lot. Now you can delve into your conversation, find out what that essentially means for the country as well. All
right, thanks, Trevor. Brian Weke, Nakia White, and Farah Maalim are here with me. I'll start with Brian. Voter registration is ending. One of the reasons that we see, as Grace said, is the delay of issuance of an ID card. First, I want to remind you, there's a roadside declaration that the president made that did not hold so much ground, that they should be allowed to register with the waiting cards. That was impossible. Why was it impossible, Brian?
I think key things. One, the president is not above the law. If you look at the Elections Act, it is very clear that the documents that one is allowed to use in terms of registration can only be an ID or a passport. Now, again, other than just a passport, you have to be over the age of 18. Because my son is around 3 years and he has a passport. So other than just having a passport, then you have to check whether the person is over the age of 18. So what the president said, clearly, as you have put it, is a gimmick, and a PR gimmick at the very least. But again, we have to be wary of the fact that this is the President of the Republic of Kenya, and we hope that people are actually using that to register voters. As you know, based on the last internal audit, we found out that there are around 138,000 people who either share serial numbers or ID numbers. And based on that, 50,000, and that's based on what IEBC has said, 50,000 actually have matched with the NRB data, and are hoping 78,000 does not match. So again, the question and the issue of audit of the voter register is a very fundamental issue.
All right, we'll talk about that, but I just want to know, on top of your mind, anything the president says is a presidential decree or it's an executive order, right?
Absolutely not. Whatever the president says cannot be a decree or an executive order.
Unless put in writing.
Unless it has to be put in writing, using proper channels as provided for in the law.
All right.
So not everything the president says is an order.
All right. Let's speak to White. Looking at the way the registration has been done, and we have had a month to register, and then there's an extension, and there could be possible extension further today. Does that concern you from where you sit?
Absolutely. So I just want to actually make a bit of a correction. It's 40 million a day. 40 million Kenyan shillings a day.
I spoke to the IEBC chair. He told me 30 million.
He said 30 million.
Yes, I spoke to him yesterday.
So even if you think about 2 more days, that's 60 million that Kenyan taxpayers would be paying. If you extend it beyond that, then it becomes almost exponential. So I think if you're talking about cost and you have a healthcare crisis where doctors are not being paid, they're being paid way below what their worth is. When you look at professors and lectorates and they're paying way below what their worth is, but you're spending exorbitant amounts of money to extend registrations. And and then you can't even audit the registration because there's an injunction against that. I think that there's some fundamental issues that really need to be cleaned up, and perhaps priorities need to be put in order in place to make sure that people who deserve to be paid properly and where those resources are going are, used in the right places as opposed to not. So while people need to register, the cost that's associated with it, I think, might be a little bit exorbitant, as given the state of Kenya right now. You have protests all over the place and people, not going to work for these things. So.
All right, Farah, for a politician, and this is beneficial because the more people you get to register, the more you're certain of getting your votes. But mass voter registration too doesn't end with the registration. Is this the final time Kenyans are registering, or there's that continuous registration? You can always pop in somewhere and register.
I don't think, to begin with, Ken, democracy is expensive. Democracy is not cheap. And again, it's all other ills, and the lack of democracy itself and the lack of that universal suffrage is what we weigh it against. Then you have despotism and dictatorship and all sorts of things. And sovereigns who will take the people as subjects the way it has been in history, medieval histories. Now let me tell you one thing. This process, one thing I like about the American system and a number of other systems is that they will always ask themselves, when we put in this provision in the Constitution, what was the intent, the object, and the spirit of the framers of that piece of legislation, of that piece of article itself. When we were putting this Constitution together, we had envisaged a process in which there will be a continuous registration. The registration for Kenyans will be a continuous process. You walk into a place and you register yourself. And you could register yourself anywhere. Right now we have a system which, in my opinion, has not failed, because digital systems in this country are perfected so well that 25 million Kenyans can be accessing the M-Pesa service itself simultaneously at the same time, and still will give you the balance. You put in the money and everybody, it's absolutely, it is fault-free. It do have some breakdowns once in a while. But we wanted a system in which you could walk into any registration center and register yourself. You register yourself to vote in any part of this country, anywhere, any constituency, any ward. And when you're in Nairobi, you could register yourself in Siaya, Bondo, wherever it is, and you have your choices. And still vote on the material data itself. Of course, you cannot vote from anywhere. Okay. You have to vote from that polling stations in that location itself. Anywhere. But for purpose of registration, this thing should have been done that way. The fact that it's not being done, I myself, I want to read mischief in it, but I don't like it. Because every time we talk about these things, you say opposition always whines all the time, whines. But you see, there's a purpose for whining that. I read mischief in it. It's not right. It is trying to take away the suffrage of people. It's trying to take away fundamental rights of Kenyans. Because for a Kenyan now to move from a place to go to another place to go and register himself, it costs money.
Why
would somebody with the kind of politics we've had in this country, the disappointment of politicians, including myself, I mean, I can't ignore myself, I'm also in the political class. How many Kenyans would be willing to spend 5,000 shillings to go and register themselves in a given place, just to go and exercise that right? And how many can afford to do it, particularly among the youth? Because the youth constitutes, 67% of the Kenyan population today? How many of them can afford it? They don't have jobs.
But why is it that it's not being done? Why is it that it's
I don't know. These are the kind of big questions, the kind of questions I ask all the time. I expect my colleagues also in the opposition to ask it as often as possible and to create a crisis about it and to say, without this, we cannot go on with this process. You see what I mean? We wait until we see the process being flawed, being manipulated, being messed, and then finally the results is predictable. When the results come is when opposition bigwigs and politicians jump up and down and say that our election has been robbed. But robbing an election is a process.
It's a process.
Yes.
But Ken, just based on what Honorable Farah is talking about. Yes, it is true. The Constitution provides for, and it's very clear, it's provided for in black and white, that Kenyans are supposed to register continuously. However, again, we are moving towards elections, and even that continues ought to stop somewhere.
It can continue
because
forever.
we have to create a register, which has to be tested.
I agree with you.
However, for me, if you ask me, because we did an audit of the register and realized in the last register, over 5 million Kenyans were disenfranchised to vote. If you look at the current projections by IEBC, they were targeting around 6.2 million. However, the people who have attained the age of majority and ought to be enfranchised to vote are around 9 million.
Absolutely.
We have only managed to register 3.something million. To me, that in itself subverts democracy in this country.
Absolutely.
So for me, even though I accept that we are running on very tight deadlines, the issues of an enfranchisement of voters, issues of universal suffrage, issues of right to vote are very fundamental. And clearly, for me, because there are people, we did a research, and we actually hired Ipsos and realized that so many Kenyans do not have IDs. The issue of issuance of IDs is quite skewed in this country.
Absolutely.
Where Farah Maalim comes from,
takes years.
I have just come from Garbatula, where you find somebody had applied for an ID over a year ago, and they will not be able to receive their ID. So for me, even though we are running on very tight deadline, the law provides that we needed to inspect the register on 9th of May. Meaning we have still over 2.5 months to key in the data. If you ask me, it does not hurt, even as this matter is still proceeding in court, the IEBC need to continue registering till the end of this month. Then close it, then draft, come up with a register for 2 months. And if you ask me, even as we collect data, IEBC ought to have clerks who are receiving data and allocating, because the biggest problem, and this is where Farah Maalim has actually brought out issues. Farah, we're only having 6,000 and something kits, which ought to be distributed to 45,000 polling stations. Now that in itself is a major problem. Now when you're saying that you want people to register, you are in Mombasa and you want to register in Nairobi, wherever you are, now that in itself would be very catastrophic. Because Ken, you can imagine even the sorting of data with these 6,000 kits and allocating it to 45,000 polling stations. You know, we only have 6,000 kits that are working. And when you go to Garissa, there's a kit, but there are many polling stations. So you'll be allocated, that kit will allocate to different polling stations. So now sorting that data in itself will be very difficult. With now you can imagine if you're doing it in Migori and you want to do it in Embakasi, you want to be registered in Embakasi West. Believe you me, that would be trouble.
Averagely, before you give us your experience, because I want an experience from outside, what this really averagely, if you have registered as a voter, you see you take 3 minutes. Averagely. So it means in an hour you can only register 20 people in an hour, which means in 10 hours, if you have to do this for 10 hours, you can only register as many people.
They don't do it for 10 hours.
And they never do it for 10 hours. So, Nakia, what is the experience?
On average, you're talking about 6-8 hours maximum.
Maximum, yes. What is the experience? How is this usually done?
Just multiply that 6,000. What do you call kids?
I'm sorry, but I think I want to jump from what what Brian said. And while the registration should continue, and that might be helpful for Kenyans, especially those that are disenfranchised, even when you kind of review the registration, if the audit isn't done, the review is really null, right? You have to have an audit, and you have to be able to compare the registry to death certificates, to see if there are double registrations, to see if people need to register. So I think that important, and which has been stalled through injunction, is the KPMJ audit. That absolutely needs to be done to have at least a baseline of, you know, who's registered versus who's not registered, and double registrations. So that's one. I think in terms of kind of looking outward and giving a kind of an inward view, the registration process has to be one that stops at some point. And for me, looking at all of the court injunctions, all of the kind of court proceedings, it just doesn't seem like there's going to be an end. Even when you do the procurement process for BVCs and ballot papers, at the very minimum, it should stop 12 months before an election, because you have to think about the entire process. And that includes, you know, how you register people. In the United States, we have a certain timeline, you know, where people have to stop registering. That's it. It's a hard timeline. And then after that, that is checked against the registry, and then people are allowed to vote. And if they are not in the registry vote when they go to the polling stations, either go behind a ballot curtain or press a button, if they're not registered, then they cannot vote. And that's just, you know, the way that the law is, and there are very little changes, you know, 8 months away from an election.
Okay, Farah, as you talk to us about that and the numbers that they were likely to get, even logically, if you calculate the number of hours they have in a day versus the number of kids and the minimum duration one needs to register, it was impossible to get all those numbers they needed unless they extend. But also tell us, what does auditing involve? What are you looking for in the register?
The auditing is, well, basically our presumption is that it's going to remove a lot of double registrations.
Okay.
Double registrations, not the same person registering more than once, but having the same ID card allocated to more than one person, or the same serial number of the voter's card allocated to more than one person, which we have seen. I mean, you somebody 001, you just put 01. Even Moi's ID card was registered along with other people. Kibaki's ID card was registered along with other people. So there's a whole mess of that. I don't know whether it was intentional or it was a pure accident. I don't believe it was an
Everyone
accident.
has a unique identification number.
That's why you call you have an identification. That identification should be yours and yours alone, nobody else in the world. So basically the point I'm trying to get at here is that they will have to clean up the register, remove all the dead people. All the dead people.
How is that? Because that's the complexity. How are you going to remove all the dead people?
Yes.
Are the certificates of death online? Are they? Is this information shared with the IEBC? And how is it shared? Is it electronically, such that when I enter the name of a dead person, immediately it's triggered off? There's a red flag on it. Yeah. Is it? Does our system work like that?
Let me tell you, Ken.
It does not.
And I want to state this.
Maybe Farah should finish, then you talk to us about that.
Yeah, the whole import of this thing was that this thing should be cleaned up so that you remove people who are in the grave. And you remove also double registration. And you basically clean up, and anybody who should be on the register and who is not on the register, and there's so many of them, by the way. The people who registered in the last exercise in Garissa, many of them up to now are not uploaded on the register. Are you aware of that, Brian Weke? People who went for registration in the last mass registration cannot find themselves there. Now the risk is they might go again for another registration, and then it turns out that the old one is uploaded, the new one is uploaded, so it's going to be a double registration again, which not only disqualifies you from voting, it's actually an offense. You understand my point? And then we have this issue of people, all this business of BVR kits that are getting lost in mysterious circumstances, and even those ones which are not lost, and these BVRs that are all about. By the way, let me tell you, there was one which was found the other day in Lee, but somehow again it was hushed up and everything. There is a policeman talking about it, but then it dies there and then. I must tell you that there's a big man who was out there registering people. The other bit that's coming out right now is that they are collecting from the voters' registers which are there, or whatever it is. They will collect names and they will try and get rid of all those names by double registering them or register. Ken Mijungu, you'll be surprised to find yourself out that somebody has already transferred your vote from Nairobi in Westlands to Mandera.
Okay.
You get my point? So the risk is that we'll get hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who would have been done that way. And will not vote on that particular date.
Okay. We want to take a short break, but Brian, I'll give you an opportunity.
Ken, I want to be very honest. We have a big problem in this country. And I want to state this without fear of contradiction. It is only in Kenya. You know, those of us who have done projects in government, there's something called a logical thought process, a logical thought flow. what you'd call a log frame. Now, Ken, it is only in Kenya where you start with outcomes and move towards output
that are known.
activities. So you've already determined an outcome, then you're moving towards the activities to justify the outcomes. Ken, this issue of audit of the voter register, we have gone and registered people. We've registered people, yet we've not looked at the veracity of the issues in the register. You've asked, how do you do a voters register? Now, how do you do an audit?
Yes.
There are different ways of doing an audit. One, you do a computer test, where you look at serial numbers as well as ID numbers. But most importantly, there is something called a voter to list audit and a list to voter audit. Now, when you're auditing a voter's register, you have to check issues to do with double registration, look at people who are registered using passports, how many were under the age of 18, look at issues to do with dead voters, look at misrepresented IDs, look at people who are registered yet they were non-existent, and that is the reason why you have to do a voter to list audit. You have to sample a number of, and 1 month is not enough for this exercise. Now, Ken, I was just talking to a number of different stakeholders within the electoral process. To date, Farah Maalim, in his constituency, you wouldn't know how many people have died since the last election. Our process of collection of data is definitely wanting. And I think this is done by government to ensure that we still keep dead voters within the register. Because if you ask the Register of Deaths now, can they give you the data of people who have passed on since the 2013?
None.
He cannot be able to tell you, because not so many people go for death certificates. What he can only clearly mention is how many people have been able to take death certificates. We cannot go and collect data from chiefs, hospitals where people have died. So I think, in all fairness, as a country, we really need to evaluate whether it is tenable to conduct these elections.
Not even elections, even just...
I was one of the proponents of conducting elections as provided for in the Constitution, but believe you me, this country cannot afford another bungled elections. I can tell you for a fact, is a recipe for disaster. And the timelines are quite crazy.
What's interesting to me is that this discussion is happening now, where you had 4 years.
We have it all the time.
To get it together. It's just really, really interesting to me to even talk about the death register not being updated, or the election register not being updated. 4 years, and in terms of the ballots,
people die every single day.
They do, but you still have 4 years to kind of update the records, and not just 6 months before election. Let me add this. When we talk about, and what Brian just mentioned at the last part of his comment, is that it is setting it up for a disaster. When you have constant injunctions, when you have people that are beating the drum and candidates that are beating the drum, that already seems like they are going to lose, right? And I think it's leading up in real energy towards a very, very contentious August the 8th, 2017.
Election. We have to take a break.
Yes, I'll make it very brief. Ken, it's not that we are waking up 6 months to the election right now and raising this issue. We've been raising these issues from day one. We raised it before the last election. You remember me going on NTV, going on KTN, going on literally every media house, K24, Citizen, and asking for these elections, if need be, to be delayed, for there to be a test run of the electronic system itself, both for identification as well as for the BVR itself. And what did we do? I remember the chairman of the Electoral Commission those days, who is a distant relative of mine, coming out in the open and say, look, if you're not ready, then you better say so, because we're ready ourselves. On day one, none of those machines worked in my county.
For voter registration?
Absolutely, yes. No, for the BVRs. On the election day number one, where you couldn't get that information there. And the whole thing was so poorly done by the Electoral Commission itself. You can only see a conspiracy to subvert the real cause of fairness and democracy itself. We are now talking about the same thing, but nobody's listening to that. And I can blame ourselves also for it as an opposition for some of these things. We look like some of us are just in the contest for the fun of the process itself. When we know what is happening and what's going to happen, when we can even sit back and say, sorry, if you can't get ABCD right, we're not going for elections. Simple. We're not going for elections. And even
no
if
one is willing to do that.
And even if need be, electioneering is a big business. You know that. Everybody knows that, and that's why I worry about whether sometimes some people are in this business to win or just in the business to make business out of it.
Money.
Yeah. So we couldn't just get into a consensus on that.
Okay.
We only got into a consensus immediately after the results to say, oh, this has been ongoing. The rigging was done. It was a process. What's the point?
Okay. And the timelines are also in the constitution, like the election date, and of course the elections.
We can't make this election now. I don't see us doing a free, fair, and a credible election. And I see not only the Kenyans being set up right now for another flawed election, but for the IEBC also being set up for another failure, just like the two previous IEBCs. Okay. So Chebukati should know that if he doesn't put his foot very hard down and say, sorry, you didn't give us time, you went on your own hanky-panky business all the time, you basically having your own political issues there as a political class, and you gave us this job rather late in the day, we cannot hold it on time, we need more time.
The implications, yes. We'll talk about that, plus the timelines, but first, let's go back to Trevor. Trevor? All right, I'm told that we take a short break rather than go back to Trevor. We'll be back with, of course, Trevor and our reporters on the ground, and we'll still have this discussion with my panel here. First, let's take a short break. All right, welcome back, and I'm still here with Brian, Nakia, and Farah. We're discussing election preparedness in relation to what has been happening. Right now, there's a case going on in court that is challenging IEBC's timeline, especially on mass voter registration too. And Okia Mtata is back in court, plus the IEBC are back in court. But the most important conversation is, will the IEBC be able to beat the timelines as envisaged in the election laws and electoral laws, and of course the constitution, to make sure that by 8th August we have an election? And will that election be credible? My panel here, it seems none of them agrees that we can have a credible election on August 8th the way we are. In fact, the Daily Nation ran a story on Monday that questioned if it will be still possible on Monday or on Tuesday, thereabout, possible to have a credible election this year. Let's get to that conversation again. Now that none of you seem to agree that we can have a credible election, do we have to talk about these timelines that the IEBC has to still beat? Brian?
First of all, there are a number of fundamental issues, even before we discuss timelines. As I've told you, it's only in Kenya where you find people start from outcomes, moving back to activities. Now, the law provides for an integrated technology, what IEBC calls KIEMS, Kenya Integrated Election Management System. Now, we are going for registration using BVR kits that have not been integrated. We have proceeded to purchase an integrated system. So, again, the question is, how integrated is integrated? IEBC have actually given specifications, and they are yet to identify a company that would be able to be charged with the responsibility of delivering that particular integrated system. Now, that system starts from registration to election, what we call EVID, Electoral Voter Identification process, then subsequently a results management system. So again, we will be in a situation where we are registering using the old BVR kits. Once we have received that particular integrated system, we start picking things from the current system to put it, that brings in room for error. And I can tell you for a fact, in the last election, what failed was not voter identification devices. Because what failed, you'd find the data for Maalim's constituency have been taken to meter.
Yes.
And that is where the problem is. And for me, even before we discuss timelines, issues of a register are very fundamental issues. A compromised register is a rigged election. So again, the issues of audit of the register and having a credible register are very fundamental issues. Now, if you get it wrong at that level, why are you going for elections?
If the opposition doesn't raise this matter right now, they're preparing ground to dispute the election. If the government doesn't raise this issue right now, they're also preparing ground to rig the election or to dispute the election if the opposition is elected. I like what Farah said about this. Why can the opposition, for example, Nakia, say that we are unable to get a credible register, an uncompromised register? We cannot go to the election right now this way. You cannot allow. Why is that difficult? And Farah says it's because election period is usually a business period also.
It is a business period, but let's be honest, you know, if opposition clearly wants to be in power, right? And that's part of the election process. So if you hold off the elections, guess what? Uhuru and Ruto stay in power, right? So I mean, I don't know what the answer might be to that. So certainly, I would agree with Brian and Honorable Farah that there are problems with the registration, the way that it's being done, and I think that to the extent that the IEBC is working incredibly hard to make sure that the registration is done and done to, you know, standards. I think their biggest problem is, you know, all of the kind of exogenous actions that are happening, from court injunctions to lawsuits to protests. And so when you're dealing with that constantly, it's very difficult to now say we're going to do our daily business and try to get it right. I think in terms of Brian's point again, in terms of the registration being compromised, IEBC has no control over how that registration or the death certificates are counted or not counted. All they can do is count the votes, which is, I think, what they're trying to do.
But it starts quite early. It starts from the registration. They don't only do the vote counting. It starts from registration.
It does start from registration, right? But you have to audit that registration against the Office of Registrar, right? And so IEBC is not in control of the Office of Registrar, nor are they in control of the Office for death certificates. So I think that when you look at those two things and how they converge, one not having control over the other, and that's when you have your compromise, especially if the Office of Registrar is not kind of doing what they're supposed to be doing in terms of auditing their registry.
I think the problem is just that we don't have a system that has all the government speaking together. We don't have that integrated system. But one of the things that the government has done that I like, because I use this a lot, is the e-citizen. You get all the details. Is there a system, for example, in the country currently that can communicate between the Register of Deaths and Births and Deaths, IEBC, e-citizen, immigration department, such that from just logging into the system, I'll know I have a passport, I have ID, all these things, I'm a registered voter. I can check all my information online. My birth certificate number is right there. We don't have such a system, and that is one of the complexities here.
You see, the only problem is the integration. We have, up until, even now, I think, up until maybe a few weeks ago, before this double registration, or rather one ID card being registered under the names, a series of names in these registers for elections came out, when first actually it was in my presence when Kalonzo and me were in Wajir. And he went there, we went there just to check whether we are registered, only for him to find that along with the same ID number was a lady called Salome Wanjiru Njoroge, 23-year-old girl. And then, of course, we raised the alarm about it. Then they closed that window in which you can just, you know, you key in certain your ID number and the rest of it, and you get a feedback from the election, the IEBC itself. There was also something similar for the ID cards. You could key in and find out if your ID card, what's at what stage in the process of your issuance of ID card it is. Now, it's only a matter of integrating those things. That information is there. The birth certificate system is digitized. That is digitized. The only thing we need to do is to integrate it so that the ID and the birth and the death and everything else, and maybe also add the driving license. I don't think the driving license is added now, but just add that bit, and there it is.
Okay.
So that way, it's IT companies and an organization can easily be given a contract to clean up those kind of things, so that everything matches. There's no double registration of one ID number having a series of names, or one birth certificate, or if there's a death certificate, then of course the voter itself is cancelled out, with it out. It's not a problem, and it's not such an expensive what they call technology. But the issue is, where is the goodwill? Because it's the easier way now to steal elections. You get my point. Now, ask me why we in the opposition are not too fussy about these things. I have a problem too. I want us to get fussy. Last time when I made a lot of noise and said, look, these things have got to be put on a test run themselves. Let us have a pilot what you call project on this and see whether it works. We can have so many constituencies and have some kind of a...
You're accused of making too much noise.
I was accused of making a lot of noise and that I'm not ready. My own position, big guy said, oh no, we are ready and everything is fine, and we are, what happens later on? We had only 8,000 votes separating between a second run and the other, and we didn't get 3 hours to go through those numbers and show them 150. By the way, let's 150.
Let's come back and conclude this conversation. But first, let's go to Trevor.
One of the things that stood out is when your namesake, Kennedy Murray, was speaking to one of the ladies there, and then that lady said that she wasn't too sure she wants to vote anyway because she thinks she doesn't have the enough crop of leaders that should give her the alternative government that she wants, or even the current government. People are not happy, and that is the one thing that experts have called voter apathy. Could that be one of the reasons IEBC is struggling with the numbers?
You see, what she doesn't know is that the vote gives her an opportunity to elect the leader she wants. So steering away or staying away from voting means she'll still get the same crop of leaders that she doesn't like. But I'll tell you what, one of the reasons why you see a lot of young people taking votes, you remember about 2 weeks ago, there was a bill that was taken to Parliament seeking to compel the young people to register as voters and making it mandatory for you to prove that at least you register or voted, for you to accrue some benefit from the government, maybe employment, maybe whatever benefit you'd want from the government.
But Ken, it also ties into what your panelists were discussing earlier on. If the election process is not credible, then the young people think that even if I vote, my vote will not really make an impact.
And we are in this for the long run. Come August, we will know. But the first question, Trevor, is it possible with all these things happening? Is it possible to have an election in August? But if, again, we have that election, is it credible? Or are we just setting up Kenya again for the chaos we saw back in 2007? What is likely to happen? It's a huge question, and that's the reason why this panel is here, Trevor. And as we wind up, perhaps that's one of the questions that I would want them to answer. Going into the election, and I'm still here with Nakia, and of course Farah is still here. But going into the election, what bothers me from what we have discussed, because these are perspectives I didn't share before, is why can't we just then decide we are not doing the election? And I'll start with Farah, because he has a very interesting perspective about the reason why we must have an election, because the election is usually business for a lot of politicians. But why must we have an election if we know we are preparing ground for this election to be disputed?
My position is, Ken, if we can't get it right, we shouldn't have it. We should give ourselves more time and make sure that we sort these things out in a manner that essentially is going to protect that sacred activity of any democracy itself. Free, fair, transparent elections in which all Kenyans are enfranchised.
Give us your formula of getting it right.
My formula is that let's give ourselves a little bit more time.
Okay.
Let's look for an international, when you say reputable, it's a very relative word, but then with no interest, an international firm from outside to come and help us with these things. Let us find out if we can get as many BVRs as we can get, you know what I mean? Because we don't even know how many of those BVRs are going to be used for the election year itself. If it's going to be 40-something polling stations. Let us revert back to the 500 number for every polling center, that you can only have 500, because 750. And you have clerks who are recruited sometimes by your own opponents, who are going to frustrate those people and take half an hour to go through one ID card to say somebody you can go ahead and test and vote. Then this thing will go into darkness. After darkness, anything can happen.
Okay.
In Garissa last time, after darkness, bombs were thrown, bullets were fired, grenades were thrown around, and 30% of the population did not vote. Consequently, the loser is the one who is now in parliament. You know what I mean? And you know, once you have a certain crime that validates you, you'll always want to fall back on that crime again and hope you can again do the same thing and win one more time. And these are people who are in power.
Okay.
So I think, in my opinion, instead of us, you know, having a flawed and you know, a sham election, and then we refuse to accept it ourselves later on in the position and say we don't recognize this, we have another chaos similar to what happened in 2008, and then we have a problem. We clearly will head for something like a failed state. I think it's better we do these things right from the word go.
Why is it that the IEBC is confident they'll do a credible election?
This is the problem. I think they're so much excited about the fact that they've been given this responsibility now, unable to go beyond that excitement, and of course a lot of goodwill and good heart. I want to believe that they're all such a, you know, fine, honest Kenyans, but they're being set up for a failure, I can assure you.
Okay.
And then they will take the blame again, they will take the rap, and they will also be bundled out of office. But by then you've already again taken this country into another level that you can. How can you do all these things in 6 months? These people have barely 6 months.
To do everything.
To do everything. If the mass registration of 1 year ago has not been fully uploaded,
how can one mass
how can one which will done right now be fully uploaded? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a problem.
Nakia.
So pushing off the elections is problematic, right? For a number of different reasons. I think while Honorable Farah makes a really good point about having the elections done right and the registration done right and free, fair elections, the truth of the matter is 4 years plus have passed to get it right. How much more time does anyone in this country need to get it right? Another 3 years, another 4 years? And if you're unhappy with the current political system that's in place now, then you have to live with them for another 3-4 years or another 6 months. So I think that's one thing that really should be looked at. I'm not sure, I can't say I completely have the answer for what the solution is to this, but certainly 4 years is enough time to work on issues and get those issues right, get the registration right, get the integration right, get the BVR kits right. It's enough time to do that, and certainly not 6 months before election, or certainly 8 months before election, which is when the protests happen in front of IEBC. Secondly, what I'm hearing from opposition has been more about them losing. It sounds that way politically, and I would say, as a political analyst, listening to it, having conducted campaigns, having run my own campaign, having won election twice as the biggest high vote getter, you understand rhetoric and you understand campaign language. And to me, it sounds like they are going to lose. And so if they're fanning that flame forward to August the 8th, it really will make for a very contentious and possibly violent election, whether it's pre or post or both election season. So I don't know what the right answer is. I don't. I'm not sure if the rhetoric around saying that we're going to lose or people are going to cheat or the registration is not done well is the right answer, and I'm not sure if pushing off the election on August the 8th is the right answer either. But certainly for the next election, hopefully that people can check off lists way before 2022.
All right, and Brian, the IEBC, I still repeat the same question I asked for. The IEBC says they're ready and they're going to deliver credible election. Listening to you, my question is, which one would be the lesser evil? Go to the election as we are, or cancel the election altogether, postpone it? Which one to you would be the lesser evil?
I think for me, let me state this. I really feel sorry for Chebukati and his team. Saying is one thing, doing is another. And I want the commission to literally sit down and interrogate certain fundamental issues. Let's interrogate these timelines as against the election date. And let's ask ourselves as a country, what are the bare minimums that we need to look at for us to have a credible election? Let us also do a risk analysis as to conducting elections as provided for in the Constitution vis-a-vis moving the elections. Because let me be honest with you, There are a number of fundamental issues that ought to happen, and I've been explaining this. Number one, we need a credible register. As we speak, somebody called Lee has just sent me a text while I'm on set, and he's saying a number of people from where he comes from have never registered. Though they've gone to register and they've been told that this ID number has already been registered. How does that happen? When you hear Farah Maalim saying that the last MVR, which was done last year, and around 1.2 million Kenyans were registered to vote, that has not been uploaded to the principal register. So if you go and check, you will find that you have not been registered. Again, the question we need to interrogate, these 3.2 million that we have done, we have registered now, is it inclusive of the MVR that was done the last time? And these are very fundamental issues. Let me not lie to you. Issues of, as we speak, there are specifications of what I was calling the Kenyans, which is the integrated technology system. Out of the people who applied for this, Ken, they are saying that specifications have been skewed to favor one supplier, that is Safran Mofo from France. And for sure, look at the specifications. Now again, that is another battleground. Once that contract has been issued, then you will see definitely people going to court, because it is very clear that that particular specifications have actually been skewed to favor a particular company. Now, in all fairness, let us look at all these issues as a country and ask ourselves, are we ready for elections? Just the other day you saw the court nullifying the contract for ballot papers. Key questions that you need to ask yourself. When IEBC gave out this contract for printing ballot papers, what was the hurry? Was there timelines? Absolutely not. Why are we giving contract for printing ballot papers, yet we don't even know
the candidates?
No, for the candidates. Number one, we don't even know how many people are in the register. You're doing it based on what? You've allocated a business for ballot papers. You don't even know how many polling stations are there. You don't even know how many candidates are there. So again, let's be very honest as a country. If you're going to give a contract for ballot paper, at the very least, you have to say, we will have 20 million in the register. So what did you base it on? Again, let us be very honest as a country. And for me, as opposed to commissioners saying, we are ready, we are charged, we are proceeding, I would ask them to sit down, familiarize themselves with the processes and procedures within IEBC, look at the legal timelines, look at fundamental issues, then that will be able to inform them that whether we can actually proceed with these elections. And they're very independent. Lastly, Ken, I would want to urge them, because they're very independent people. You know, it is only IEBC, if you look at the Chapter 15 commissions, it is only IEBC that has the name independent. The other ones are Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, NCIC. It is only IEBC that has the name independent, even though commissions are actually independent. I want the Chebukati team to actually give Kenyans a way forward. There is no problem with us proceeding to increase the voter registration, because people do not have IDs until the end of the month. They will still have 2 months to prepare the register. I rest my case. Thank you very much.
All right.
You see, the presumption that opposition is in any way either scared or not willing to go that, or have already thrown in the towel and they think they have lost, I mean, in itself is just the cheap rhetoric that we get from the other end. I mean, no opposition. Opposition is come together right now in a bigger super alliance, and that super alliance is going to work and hold together. So, but the fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter how well prepared we are ourselves with our voters to vote, but the system that's going to be in place is not a system that is foolproof, that is going to ensure that we have free, fair, and transparent elections. Then it's only fair that we start raising these red flags in advance. I can assure you one thing, and this I can tell you right in front of the television and everybody here, that my seat is one of the safe seats for that for the opposition right now, and I'm not worried about that. But the big issue is we have a systemic problem in the system, and it's the people who are in control of the power right now feel like they can still employ what they employed last time to come back again. And all this fuss about going all over the country, even in the midst of drought, in the midst of teacher strikes and lecturer strikes and doctor strikes when people are dying. But here are people who are running around, asking people to register themselves as voters. There is a preparation, a psychological preparation of the people that, look, we did enough, we have registered enough votes, and we have won because we've registered enough votes. You get my point? And that's not lost to us. The idea is that we're preparing this thing for a mischief that's going to come there. And I think the only fair thing is that let us get it absolutely right. Such that even the loser will be in a position to shake the hands of the winner and tell them, look, I consider defeat.
All right, as we end this discussion, Nakia, I'd like to give you an opportunity for the way forward with this, because I think we have gone round and round. But one thing that is clear is that as it is right now, it's not possible to have a credible election. But remember, there's a team that has to deliver, and secondly, Kenyans expect an election. How do you go about this as we close?
Oh, that's a really good closing question, and I'm not sure if I have the answer to that. Again, I would say, pushing forward the election, I'm not sure what that will resolve. Again, and I will say this 1,000 times over, if you have 4 years and you can't get it right in 4 years, how much more time do you need to get it right? Number one. So pushing forward the election, I'm not sure is the answer. Yes, Kenyans are expecting an election because it is the democratic way. It is part of the Constitution that Kenyans passed. So yes, they expect an election. I think, understanding the democracy and understanding that whomever wins, you have to accept that whether you like it or you don't like it, I think will be hard for many people to swallow, given all of the kind of interruptions that the IEBC has had to deal with. Speaking of independent, which is what Brian said earlier, that independent is the only name the IEBC is the only commission with the IEBC, and it's really not independent because they are constantly attacked by lawsuits. They are constantly attacked by injunctions. Not only that, their budget is part of the budget that MPs vote on and senators vote on. So it's constantly, I think in terms of, while they might want to be independent, I think that they struggle with their own independence because of all of the infiltration of outside influences, whether it be law or finances or public opinion. So I think the IEBC really has a very, very tough job. I would not want to be in that position at all, because to have that job and to be responsible for such a potentially contentious election is something that they are going to have to deal with. And I think that there's going to be incredible fallout after this election, given what my two panelists have already mentioned over and over again, that they do not believe that this is going to be a fair and credible election, and that they do not believe that the registrar IEBC is meeting the call for all Kenyans. So with that being said, I don't have an answer. With that being said, I do think that tempers should be calmed a bit before August the 8th. Whether or not I think that that's going to happen, I'm not sure.
Okay, Brian.
When I hear Nakia speaking, and she says that we've had 4 years to plan elections, and just also drawing from what Kriegler said,
But you have had 4 years, right?
I agree with you.
Yeah, but we're not the system. We're not in the government. We're not in the executive.
Right.
You initiate this.
That time, if you listen to Kriegler the last time he visited us, he said that time does not run out at the end. It runs out at the start. Again, issues of planning. That's why I'm telling you, as a country, we have a problem, and I want to agree with Nakia that we have a huge problem, because what happens is that we work from outcomes back to activities, as I had said. And I also want to ask Nakia to understand that unlike the US, where people believe in certain institutions. We are coming from a history, Ken, where, and if you look at
really
the,
true.
again, Kregler report, he said very clearly, an independent person who was gotten from South Africa, that he does not know who won the last elections. If you look at, again, the last election, which is 2013, again, you hear there are very fundamental issues that compromise that particular election. So, and that is the reason why, let me tell you, Ken, we have to get it right. This country, and take this to the bank, will not survive another bungled election. That I can tell you very clearly. We have to get it right. There are no two ways about it. If it needs time, let's give it time.
But
if
how
it
much more
needs
time
technical
is that?
expertise, because let me tell you, we talk about election as a cycle. But I want to agree with Nakia, we don't look at it as a cycle in terms of implementation. We are here and it is a reality. Let us smell the coffee. Elections are in 6 months' time, and yet we have not done a lot of fundamental issues. The question is, do we proceed as is and deal with the consequences, or do we make it right? We have new commissioners. I agree with you that we ought to have planned better, but this is the reality. We are where we are.
Okay. Farah, finally.
Yeah, we don't have regulatory machinery. We can't initiate things. We can't do things. We're not the power. We're not the executive. We can only create pressure groups and do a bit of demonstration. You remember how long it took us demonstrating up there, being tear gassed?
By NLBC,
Yes, tear gassed again. And even after that, why did it take again the system 1.5 years to get rid of the old IEBC? This is the same old IEBC where Kenyans have said they have no faith in it, but went ahead and concluded a contract for the printing of the ballots. How can you be doing that? I mean, how can we get so immoral, so base, as to be able to be taken such a fundamental, decisions, when those decisions are not even needed? You only print the ballot boxes when you know how many candidates are there in every constituency, and the different wards and everything else, and that information is not there now. But they went ahead and to order that. You can see the mischief and the corruption and the crookedness that's there. And now I'm told that there's also this the suit that's likely to take again center stage again, which things are going to be sorted out in the courts. So personally, we are ready. We can have elections even tomorrow, because all we need to do is tell our people to come out. But we don't see any structures and systems in place that is going to ensure that there's a free, fair, and credible and transparent election in there. We don't want another bungled election, because another bungled election or a sham election again, you can rest assured we're back to where we came from before. And then worse than that, Ken, worse than that, now the people in the system are boisterous and thumb-chesting now. The international jurisdiction has not worked. You know what I mean? We never had faith in our own local domestic jurisdiction before for purposes of addressing issues of impunity. Now, if we get into an impunity, last election, people did not take the law into their own hands because everybody was scared of the ICC. Now people have seen how ICC can be demystified. Get rid of the witnesses, bribe others, scare others away. There are no witnesses, so you're home and dry. Victims can suffer forever. I mean, this country has never cared about the poor in this country. So, because of that, there is no faith anymore in the international jurisdiction too. So when somebody does not have faith in the local jurisdiction, doesn't have faith in the international jurisdiction, the issues of impunity, we go back to people. It's a natural human phenomena for people now to become very primitive, and we have a failed state again. So it's my somber prayer, wish, and plea to Kenyans, including the people who are in power. Let us try and get this thing right now. Right. If you have won fairly, we will be there to celebrate your victory. If on the other side, our side wins fairly, be there to celebrate the victory with us.
Okay. But my final question is, how much more time do you need?
I think just a few months. I think
few months.
To be honest, just a few months.
Sufficient time to get everything right.
But what equates to efficient time?
Well, 2-3 more months, and I think that's when there's a serious work being done to get this right. I think we can get it right.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you, Brian Weke from the Institute.
We can also, in the meantime, see how this commission operates in the next 1 or 2 months. If indeed they know what we don't know ourselves, and they can get it very well right, we'll say.
Well and
but
good.
2 or 3 months pushes you right into December, which is where it was before. right? Right before the holidays, and people have a greater sense of apathy around the holidays, right? They don't go out and vote because their mind is on
Kenyans can't go for holidays anymore. Nobody has the money to go for it.
We have to end the conversation.
It's so bad
that people can't go for holiday anymore. Okay, we have to end the conversation. Thank you very much, Farah Maalim, former Deputy Speaker in the 10th Parliament. Nakia White, she's the Managing Partner at Global Ladder Africa. Thank you for coming. And finally, Brian Weke from the Institute for Education in Democracy. Thank you very much. And that ends our discussion here.